When you're building your team, when you're drafting, the one thing you really need is a consistent running back on your team. Today we're going to break down some of the consistent running backs that they had in 2021 to help you better understand how you should build your roster in 2022. Let's get it. Welcome into another video. This time we're going over the consistency rankings at the running back position. It's super important to understand which running backs finish consistently in the top 12 so that way you can build your roster appropriately. I broke down these positions in 3 tiers. Tier 1 is anyone who finished 80% or better. Tier 2 is anyone who finished 70% or better. And Tier 3 is anyone who finished 60% or better. Starting in the first tier, ranked number 1 in 2021 was Jonathan Taylor. Taylor played in 17 games last season and finished in the top 12 88% of the time, which was the best in the NFL. He finished top 6 65% of the time, in between 7 and 12 23% of the time, and only finished outside of the top 12 12% of the time. Jonathan Taylor was fantasy gold last season. You were able to swoop him up in the second or third round, and he dominated every week for you. This year, everyone is well aware of what Jonathan Taylor can do for your fantasy team. Now, with an upgrade at quarterback, Taylor should easily repeat his production from 2021. Number 2 last season was Austin Ekeler. Ekeler played in 16 games last season and finished in the top 12 87% of the time. He finished top 6 62% of the time, 7 through 12 25% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 just 13% of the time. Ekeler is a do-it-all type of running back. He is a PPR gold mine just waiting for you to swoop him up in your drafts. Ekeler is usually a late first-round pick, and boy, he can help pay you some nice dividends for your roster. They brought in a rookie to help lighten the load, but look for Ekeler to still dominate in snaps and produce at a high level in 2022. Next, we have the number 3 running back from 2021 in Josh Jacobs. Jacobs played in 15 games last season and finished in the top 12 80% of the time. He finished in the top 6 27% of the time, and between 7 and 12 53% of the time, and then finished outside of the top 12 20% of the time. It may seem to surprise some that Jacob landed so high on that consistency chart. The reason why he's so high is because of the sheer volume this guy received. Even with the massive amount of volume he saw, he didn't produce the solid numbers you would think. If his volume decreases, you will certainly see his consistency numbers drop. Unfortunately, I believe this to be the case in 2022. Look at Jacobs to be a low-end RB1 in 2022. Now let's move on to Tier 2 and talk about the number 4 running back from 2021 in Najee Harris. Harris played in 17 games last season and finished in the top 12 77% of the time. He finished top 6 59% of the time, in between 7 and 12 18% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 23% of the time. Harris plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is a team that likes to use the RB1 all season long. They run their players straight into the ground, and that means fantasy owners drool over this type of production. Harris had a good rookie campaign behind an awful offensive line. They look to have improved their line this offseason, which should help raise Harris's consistency even more. Moving on to the number 5 running back from 2021, we have Derrick Henry. Henry played in only 8 games last season due to injury, but finished in the top 12 75% of the time. He finished top 6 75% of the time, between 7 and 12 0% of the time, and he finished outside of the top 12 25% of the time. Henry is clearly a top running back as he gets over 90% of the running back carries in Tennessee. He is the definition of a bell cow. A 200-yard rushing and a nasty stiff arm game is nothing for this big man. Watching Henry run is a whole lot of fun when he's on your roster. Now we're at the number 6 running back from last season. Let's talk about Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey played in 7 games last season and finished in the top 12 71% of the time. He finished top 6 57% of the time, in between 7 and 12 14% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 29% of the time. The name of the game for McCaffrey is health. If McCaffrey can stay healthy, the volume that McCaffrey sees can vault him to the number 1 fantasy producer easily. His problem is a massive red flag waving in the air saying stay away due to injury risk. Draft him with the hopes he stays healthy and can lead your team all the way to a championship, but drafter beware. On to the number 7 running back from last season and the last player in this tier in Leonard Fournette. Fournette played in 14 games last season and finished in the top 12 71% of the time. He finished top 6 just 36% of the time, 7 through 12 35% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 29% of the time. It wasn't long ago when Fournette was a dominant running back for the Jaguars, and now he is the lone back once again for the Bucs. Fournette's consistency is helped by having Tom Brady as the quarterback. Look for Fournette to see the bulk of the carries for the Bucs and to give you consistent weeks even more so than last season. I see Fournette in the high 70% mark in 2022 in consistency. Next, we're going to be moving on into Tier 3 and talk about the number 8 running back from last season in Alvin Kamara. Camarda played in 13 games last season and finished in the top 12 69% of the time. He finished top 6 62% of the time, between 7 and 12 7% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 31% of the time. Kamara's biggest worry right now is the court date that he has for that mishap he had during the Pro Bowl when he punched a guy. If all of that is clear, he should once again be very consistent and should climb into the 70% mark. I believe that's the biggest positive Camarda can have, is that for Winston to stay healthy all season long. Now let's go over the running back who finished number 9 last season in Dalvin Cook. Cook played in 13 games last season and finished in the top 12 69% of the time. He finished top 6 54% of the time, between 7 and 12 15% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 31% of the time. Cook seems to not be able to finish a season playing all of his games to save his soul. I could easily see Cook's consistency rise if he was just able to stay on the field. Draft Cook with caution that he may not be there for your fantasy playoffs. Next, we have the number 10 running back from last season, Joe Mixon. Mixon played in 16 games last season and finished the top 12 69% of the time. He finished top 6 44% of the time, between 7 and 12 25% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 31% of the time. Mixon arrived on the scene as a top fantasy producer in 2021. Largely, most of that was due to Joe Burrow and the offense taking a huge leap in production, leading them all the way into the Super Bowl in 2021. If the offense stays churning and the bill of health remains clear for Mixon, look for him to continue having a stellar consistency numbers in 2022. On to the number 11 running back from last season, DeAndre Swift. Swift played in 13 games last season and finished in the top 12 69% of the time. He finished as a top 6 31% of the time, between 7 and 12 38% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 31% of the time. Swift plays for one of the worst teams in the NFL, which means a lot of negative game scripts. While Swift is a very good receiver, he needs to have more volume on the ground for fantasy owners to be happy with his consistent production. He had finished between 7 and 12 more than in the top 6 solely due to his team, not because of his talent. Lastly, let's look at the number 12 running back from last season, James Conner. Conner played in 15 games last season and finished in the top 12 67% of the time. He finished in the top 6 47% of the time, between 7 and 12 20% of the time, and finished outside of the top 12 33% of the time. Now that running back Chase Edmonds left for Miami, James Conner should be the lead ball carrier in Arizona with no competition. Also, having Hopkins out for the first 6 games of the season means more touches for Conner. Look for the consistency to rise for Conner, who plays for a stout offense in 2022. Now let's kind of sum up all of the running back consistency rankings all together. In Tier 1, you got Jonathan Taylor, Austin Ekeler, and Josh Jacobs. Tier 2, we're looking at Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, and Leonard Fournette. And in the last tier, Tier 3, we have Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, and James Conner. Again, looking at all 12 of these running backs, you can't go wrong in 2022. They're going to give you some good production. They're going to be solid for your fantasy teams. We just have to see how it all plays out in 2022. We'll be coming out with our overall rankings shortly, and that way you guys can see where I have everybody breaking down. As always, thank you for watching the video. If you aren't subscribed, consider hitting that subscribe button. About 80% of you guys that watch these videos aren't even subscribed. It would really help me out and really appreciate it. Give me a thumbs up if you think we did a good job here. Leave a comment down below if you have anything to add. I can't wait to see you guys in the next video. We'll see you next time.